You've tasted the open, spacious reality of non-duality, and you know that you are the sky, not the weather. But there can still be times when someone says the wrong thing, and your stomach still knots up, or you get into a massive fight with your partner, and afterwards you just think, what was going on there? Why did I get so triggered? Maybe you go to a party or a gathering, and you find yourself watching. You're very awake, but somehow there's something blocking you from participating fully. And there's a voice in your head that's saying, if I'm awake, why is it that I still get triggered? So there's a blind spot in modern spirituality. On the one hand, you have the direct path. It says, go straight to awareness, don't pass go, don't collect the £200. But the point here is that you bypass everything that's happening within conditional existence. Go straight to awareness right now. And this is very good for becoming very awake, but it's not good at integrating this into your life. I mean, this is why monks live in monasteries. They reach very high levels of realization, but it's not easy for them to transfer that back into the relative world. And on the other hand, you have the indirect path. This includes body work, somatic work, emotional work, and psychological work. And this is good at dealing with the human condition, but it gets stuck in an endless cycle of fixing. You can spend 1,000 lifetimes healing your trauma, but at some point you need to realize who you really are. And so actually in spirituality, the full path needs to include both of them. So today I'm going to unpick the details of what's going on and how to navigate this gap between these two approaches. And so I'm going to talk about what is the ego, how is it formed, how this fits with awakening, and what you can do about it. So initial awakening, what's actually happening is we're ungluing our identity from the self-concept. That's the me thought or the I thought. But in actual fact, the self-concept is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of our ego structure. Below that, you have a self-image, and you also have a self-contraction, which is a physical contraction in the body. And the self-concept is relatively light because it's just a thought. But as you go down deeper into these deeper layers, you reach heavy, dense, emotional, and somatic layers. So here's the situation. You might be awake, but your ego still exists. And when life is stressful, it's going to jump in and take you over. And when that happens, you get triggered, and there's nothing you can do about it. So in order to go deeper, it's helpful to start deconstructing and mapping out what's actually going on within the ego identity structure. So we tend to think of our identity as one single monolithic entity called me. But the reality is it's actually made up of very many individual psychological parts. For example, did you ever feel self-conflict? Maybe one part of you wants to go out, but another part of you is tired and just wants to chill at home. So this is the protective parts in action. Each part has a particular strategy it's using to try and keep you safe, and sometimes these strategies can conflict with each other, which creates this sense of an inner conflict or inner tension. And in day-to-day speaking, we would tend to say something like, I feel tired, I feel angry. But what's closer to the reality when you examine it is it's more that you have an angry part that came up or a tired part that came up. So our ego structure is like a big ball of all of these parts. So their primary job is to try and keep us safe and try and prevent us feeling pain and going near to our trauma. And we tend to think of trauma as being something really big, like being in an accident. But the reality is that a lot of trauma is much more mundane. It could be not being given enough attention by your parents, or it could be being given too much attention and being smothered, or it could be being shouted at and humiliated at school. When we're children, our nervous system is much more sensitive. So even these things that seem relatively small as adults can be traumatic for a child. So trauma isn't just a story. Trauma happens when you experience something and the emotion is just too much for your body to conduct in the moment. And in that situation, a very primitive defense kicks in, and this is to either try and run away or fight or to freeze and dissociate. Now in that moment, if the body freezes and dissociates, it's not able to completely process and resolve whatever happened. So then the body holds on to this feeling, the pain or the shame, and the mind builds a strategy around it to try and make sure that that situation never happens again. And unless we go back and let our body know that this is no longer happening, this protective subroutine can keep running for decades. It can keep running for the rest of your life, keeping you safe from something that's not happening anymore. Now, these protective parts operate in your mind like mini computer programs. Each one has a specific memory of what happened and what it needs to do to stop that happening again. So let's look at how this happens in real life. You could imagine a little girl playing in the park, and in one moment a big dog runs at her barking. She can't fight and she can't run, so she just freezes. A moment later the danger passes, but before her system can settle down, her mum grabs her and starts screaming at her. "Why did you run off? What's wrong with you? Bad girl." So her system is flooded with fear, shame, confusion. So it drops straight into survival mode. This must never happen again. And it writes a subroutine to try and protect her from this in the future. The body learns that the world is dangerous. I'm alone. I'm bad. It's my fault. No one can keep me safe. All of those emotions that were too much to feel become a wound, an exiled emotional contraction that's frozen in the body. Then also a protector forms. I'll never let this happen again. I'll always be scanning, always be checking, looking out for danger, predicting people's mood, making sure that I'm perfect. Then I'll be safe. And then she grows up and she forgets about it. She knows that she doesn't really like dogs. And for 30 years, this protective code is running all the time in the background. The pain is buried somewhere deep, and the protection is always scanning everywhere, making sure that this doesn't happen again. So we start off in childhood with one wound, our first trauma. Then over time, more and more of these big and small traumas stick to it, layer by layer. All of the beliefs we have about ourselves and about the world create our self-image. And all of the emotion and pain is stored in our body as a kind of physical contraction. So the name we give for this big ball of trauma is me or I. And then we identify with it. We think we really are all of that. And at some point, maybe this identification breaks. If you go on a deep retreat, you realize that you're the experiencer rather than the experience. You're not a protection and you're not a wound. But the thing is, just because you realize that doesn't necessarily mean that all of these psychological defensive subroutines instantly just let go. They're frozen in time, running an outdated program, and they, in many cases, still think that you're a child. So when, for example, your boss uses that very specific tone that reminds you of your father criticizing you, straight away this has a visceral reaction and you get triggered. So protection doesn't care if you're awake or not. It's like a security guard. The security guard's only objective is to keep their client safe. In the same way, your protection's only interest is to keep you safe. And this isn't something that you're doing wrong. This is just the way the human body responds to conditioning. It's a survival mechanism. And you know, maybe when we have these reactions, at the time it was a helpful way to react. But something that could be very overwhelming for a child isn't necessarily overwhelming anymore for an adult. It's like if you were given a rain jacket as a child because you were playing outside and it was cold and raining. At the time, this is helpful. It keeps you warm and dry. But now it's 30 years later. The sun is shining. You're at the beach. And you're still wearing this tiny little child's rain jacket. It's no longer serving a purpose that's helpful. It's constricting and limiting you rather than keeping you safe. And it's not that the protection is wrong. It was just built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. It's like when we build a house. In order to build the house, we need to create a structure, a scaffolding. But once the house is finished, we take down the scaffolding because it's not needed anymore. And the ego structure is like that. When we're children, we need this protective structure to make sure that we survive. And it's a normal part of development that at some point we wake up. But once we're awake, we need to enter the second movement of awakening, that is the deconstruction of this structure. You find some relief in the initial awakening, but the main point of waking up is to allow you to see that you're wearing that little rain jacket. And the relief only actually comes when you finally feel safe enough to take it off. So now we're going to do a little exercise so that we could actually start to work with this directly. The first thing to do is think of a situation where you get triggered or you feel uncomfortable. Then identify which part is going on. And to do that, you can ask the question, what's difficult about this situation? For example, you could say, I get frustrated when there's a lot of traffic. What's difficult about that? Well, it's difficult because there's anger and frustration. So there's an anger and a frustration part coming up. So now that you've identified a part of your psychology, it's actually possible to communicate directly with this part. And this might seem a bit weird at first, but actually the best thing to do is just simply try it out and see what happens. So you can ask it questions like, what's your job? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to keep me safe? How old do you think I am? How capable do you think I am? And then after you've asked, just see what happens. Often you'll get a very clear reply. And people get confused about this because they think maybe they're just imagining it. But often the reply you get back could be something you would have never thought of. It can be surprising or illuminating. And this is how you know that you're actually communicating with a part of your psychology. And now there are a couple of pitfalls that can happen as well. One can be that rather than asking the part directly, your mind starts to imagine the conversation. And if this happens, this isn't very helpful. This is actually another protective part. It's a part of your mind that doesn't want you to work with your psychology. You can tell this happens because you'll get a thought like, I think it's because of this. And in this case, you can either try and work with that part, or you can just give it some time and try again later. Other times, you'll just get silence. And this doesn't mean that you're failed. It probably just means that your psychology doesn't trust you enough to start talking to you. Because oddly enough, you have a relationship to your psychology, and your psychology also has a relationship to you. It's a two-way thing. Just because you're open to talk with your psychology doesn't necessarily mean that your psychology is open to respond. And the third very common pitfall is that doubt will come up. I don't know how to do this. I don't think it's going to work. Maybe I try it later. And again, this is another protection. This is a protection that is handling the feeling of doubt. For a lot of people, doubt isn't an easy emotion to feel. So this protection is coming in the way of feeling the doubt in order to misdirect your attention so you do something else. And so this technique gives you a very powerful way to start relating to your own psychology. And this can create very surprising and immediate results. I was working with someone who had been very stuck in his career and life. And within about 3 sessions, he moved out of his house, he moved to a different city, and he got a new job. So it can bear fruit very quickly, especially if you've done other exploration like direct path realization work. And this is part of the indirect path. It's happening within space and time, within your physical body. And once you know who you are, you return to your body and psychology and work through all of the fragments of who you used to think you were, part by part, and let them wake up too. So I hope you found this video interesting. And if you have any comments or if you want any further advice, just put it in the comments. And look forward to seeing you next time.